Thank you very much, as always, and happy International Women's Day. Minister, the most recent Dublin City Joint Policing Committee report shows marked increases in the cases involving domestic violence. So on one hand, I'm really pleased clearly if the figures to the Gardaí are increasing, that shows that more people are reporting it. However, what I actually believe is happening is that it is the overall increase in people suffering domestic abuse and consequently we have an increase in the Garda numbers. Domestic violence, I just want to acknowledge, despite it being International Women's Day, is not only a female issue. It is men, trans and non-binary people also suffer domestic violence, and while I don't know specific figures for Ireland, I have been privy to a number of conversations and representations that would demonstrate that if you are a trans non-binary person in a relationship, you're disproportionately vulnerable to domestic violence from an intimate or intimate partner violence. Of the statistics I do know, women are statistically more likely to be attacked and abused repeatedly in their own home, more likely to be subjected to abuse and coercive control, and more likely to be killed by their partner or former partner. So that's not new news, and I welcome that we have steadily seen an increase in funding over the last number of years, and the response certainly during COVID has been very impressive and very welcomed, and the budget as put through most recently has been fantastic as well. However, I suppose I would advocate, no matter how good we're doing and how much our funding is being, if it's not being targeted, if it's not being monitored, reviewed and constantly assessed, then we're not doing enough to make sure that it's going to where it should be going and that it is being targeted at the right groups. So I suppose, do we look into ourselves and believe we're doing enough? Because I congratulate you, Minister, for all that has been done, but until we start seeing figures drop, I believe that there is always much more and we will never have done enough.
I welcome the opportunity to respond, and again, it is particularly apposite that we're discussing this issue on International Women's Day. And as we know, as Senator Seery-Kearney said, domestic, sexual and gender-based violence can occur in many different forms, and it can be experienced by any one of us. But I think it's indisputable that girls and women are disproportionately affected by such acts. My colleague, Minister McEntee, has lead responsibility for coordinating policy on DSGBV, but ensuring an effective infrastructure to respond to DSGBV is also a very significant priority for my own department, and I'm actively working with Minister McEntee to fulfil that commitment in the programme for government to conduct an audit of the segmentation of responsibility for DSGBV across government departments and agencies. This audit, it is underway at the moment, and I'm hopeful that it will shortly provide us with proposals on the required infrastructure to ensure that we have all the issues with DSGBV are dealt with in the most effective and the most holistic manner possible. We really need to provide the absolute best service to those who need this particular type of support. TUSLA, which falls within the remit of my own department, has statutory responsibility for the care and protection of victims of DSGBV. It provides funding for about 60 organisations across the country, including those providing emergency refuge for adults and children fleeing domestic violence, 16 rape crisis centres and a range of community-based domestic violence supports. In 2021, I increased TUSLA's allocation for DSGBV by 4.7 million to a total of €30 million. 28 million of this is core funding for the services, and an additional 2 million is COVID contingency funding to meet the additional demands that you both spoke about in terms of the pandemic. And this is a very significant increase in core funding, and I think that indicates the real importance that the government places on this particular issue. And investment in recent years has seen the rollout of child-centred services for younger victims of domestic and sexual violence. And Senator O'Reilly will know of the Barnahouse project in Galway for child and adolescent victims of sexual violence. It's a very positive development, and we plan to expand this service to locations in Dublin and Cork as well. And last December, I got Cabinet agreement to commence a process to introduce paid domestic violence leave and benefit. Consultations on this are ongoing. I was speaking with trade unions and with employer employers groups last week about this issue, and I will bring forward proposals to Cabinet by the end of the year. Senator Seery-Kearney raised a particular report regarding Garda statistics in the Dublin South Central area. TUSLA have advised me that almost 1.5 million of the additional 4.7 million funding will be directed to services in the greater Dublin area, so Dublin, Wicklow and Kildare. And TUSLA has also advised me that additional domestic violence outreach services are being rolled out in Dún Laoghaire, Rathdown and in County Wicklow to enhance supports for both women and children experiencing domestic violence, with additional outreach planned to come on stream in the Dublin South Central area. A number of safe home accommodation units with support services in Dublin will reach 20 in 2021, which is an increase of 13 from last year. And TUSLA has provided an additional resources to the 24/7 domestic violence and sexual violence helplines, which are operated by Women's Aid and the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. And Senator O'Reilly, you already referred to Cope Galway. It opened a new and improved domestic violence refuge in the city, supported by TUSLA, and Saoirse Women's Refuge opened a new refuge in South Dublin earlier in 2020. And finally, both senators will be aware that TUSLA is currently undertaking a review of emergency accommodation, which will consider the current level of provision and the configuration of accommodation that may be needed. And it is the intention that this review will inform future decisions and future investment as regards accommodation and that really vital emergency accommodation for victims of DSGBV.
And thank you, Minister. I really welcome the increase in funding, and particularly the Safe Ireland initiative. I think has been a very successful one. I'm very grateful, particularly to the work of Saoirse and the Inchicore Women's Support Service, which provide fantastic services in the Dublin South Central area. I really welcome the report. I think it's very good. We need to know what is working and what isn't working in order to make sure that we are funding correctly into the future.
Thanks very much. Well, look, as we called it out in the programme for government, DSGBV is an epidemic in our country, and we're ever more conscious of this during COVID. And those high reporting figures, they're actually good because it is a sign that primarily women are coming forward and saying what's happening. And the government has identified this epidemic, and we're going to address it. And there are four major areas besides all the other items that Senator O'Reilly mentioned. But the additional funding, and we're going to continue that through each budget. The audit of responsibility. We need to design our structures better. They're not working fully as they currently are, and we're going to redesign them. And that audit response should be with us in the next number of months. Domestic violence leave, paid leave. We'll be one of the first countries in Europe to actually adopt that, and that will be absolutely essential. Recognising the poverty that so many people fleeing domestic violence fear. And finally, the accommodation review. Aware of that desperate need for more accommodation across the country, but taking a step back, looking to see where it is. Is it emergency accommodation? Is it step-down accommodation? What's needed so we can better plan and better put in resources, particularly those capital resources, to initiate a refuge or supported accommodation. So this is a commitment for a government. It's a job between myself, between Minister McEntee and other ministers as well, and we're absolutely committed to addressing this issue.